say there is no honor among thieves.
No, but there are some delicious recipes to be shared. That one is for sure. So what are we covering today, Ahenia?
We are covering the riot of Sierra Chica, a prison in Argentina, in the province of Buenos Aires, that during Holy Week of 1996, is that how you say it, Holy Week?
Yeah, Holy Week works. Yep.
Okay. Just a couple of days or a week before Easter, this prison was the stage for a prison riot.
Yes.
That we have many in Argentina. I actually have a memory of watching one of those in Cordoba when I was very young. But this riot, this mutiny, would become actually the longest and bloodiest of Argentinian history, which is why we choose this as the subject for this new episode.
Yes.
Sierra Chica, it's located approximately 12 kilometers from Olavarría and 350 kilometers at the southwest of the city of Buenos Aires. It has an estimated population of 5,000 inhabitants and 3,000 inmates. The penal number 2 is the maximum security one and was built on 1881 by direct order of the former president of Argentina, Julio Argentina Roca, because he wanted to use it as a military fortress during the desert conquest, or Conquista del Desierto in Spanish, which was a military operation that the Argentinian state developed to try to basically take the south of Argentina from the indigenous and aboriginal First Nations that lived, and they still live nowadays, even though thousands were murdered and even more thousands were enslaved in that. But that's a story for a different episode.
Indeed.
So, what's the shape of this prison? It's what type of prison?
Well, it's a panopticon.
Yes,
is that
it
what
is.
it is? Yeah, so basically it has the wings radiating out from a central tower, which is the control unit, and each of the wings obviously houses different threat levels of prisoner, and different administration areas and stuff like that are all centered around the actual central tower. And the idea is you can have complete vision and security and oversight of each of the 8 wings from the central tower, which makes it easier looking, inside looking out rather than outside looking into a condensed, impenetrable unit. So yeah, that's how this was set apart. And also, once the riot kicked off, that's how the prison guards were effectively trapped in the centre, rather than on the outside firing in.
So it all started because 13 inmates have decided to escape from the prison on Holy Week, because allegedly the security measures were a bit more relaxed during that time.
Yes.
So one of those prisoners was Marcelo Brandan Juarez, who got into an office and solicited to use the public telephone. That's when another of his accomplices got into the same office, and using a gun that we later on discovered that gun was given to that inmate by its lawyer on a visit. It seems like this inmate had also affair with his lawyer, so he saw her in a intimate
conjugal
reunion, and he got a gun.
Yeah.
So that's how quickly they got 4 prison guards, an arm. That's how they got their guns. And 4 other. Meanwhile, in the backyard of the... Meanwhile, on the backyard of the prison, other inmates tried to escape by crawling the walls, but there was another prison guard called Walter Vivas whom shot them. He, to be more precise, he injured in a leg one of the prisoners, and he prevented them from jumping off from the prison. Panic.
Yep.
Quickly
spread through
the prison, and actually another inmate was murdered by one of the prison guards. So one of the so we have an original 13 group of prisoners. One of those was murdered by a prison guard. So we had 12 left, the ones that were trying to escape. Because of the number, because they were 12, because the mutiny happened during Holy Week, these 12 inmates, that they were more taking part in the riot, but these were the brains.
Yep, the main 12 instigators that were left.
They will be known as the 12 apostles. And their names were, Marcelo Brandan Juarez, whom we already mentioned. He was 28 years old, and he had been in jail since he was 18 because of several different robberies. He had also been in a juvenile when he was younger. He said in an interview with the prison psychiatrist that he actually started when he was 15, and he was born and raised in a slum. So he started stealing because he needed it. One of the other leaders was Jorge Pedraza, who was 32 years old. Then we have Miguel Chiquito Acevedo, 24 years old. Hector Nanini, that had been convicted for 9 years and a half for murder as well. We have Carlos Gorosito Ibáñez, who was 35 years old. Marcelo Pérez, 43 years old, who was convicted for robbing a bank. Interesting. Jaime Pérez Sosa, who was 26 years old. Víctor Esquivel, 36 years old. Oscar Olivera Sánchez, 25 years old. Carlos Villalba Macei, who had been in that prison only for 6 months before the riot because of a robbery. Héctor Retamar, who had been convicted to life in prison for a homicide. And Marcelo Quiroga, who was 21 years old, and he was also in prison because of several robberies and an injury. How do you say?
Assault.
Assault, physical assault.
Physical assault.
So these 12, the 12 apostles were the main faces, but quickly a number of inmates also joined the riot, approximately 1,500 started to riot as well, because we have to say, to be fair, that prisons in Argentina are not a good place.
No.
If they are supposedly made to rehabilitate a person, they don't do that at all. It's more like they...
It's fairly bare bones housing, if anything.
Exactly.
And would it be fair to say that occasionally, if an inmate is able to bribe a prison guard, that their family or mistresses or extra luxuries are allowed to be freely brought in and allowed through security, or it's not that
it wasn't so hard. So we're going to see what sort of conflicts were in the prison aside from the failed escape. So at 10 p.m. of that same day, approximately, the judge, Maria Mercedes Malere, got inside the prison in the company of a secretary to try to negotiate with rioters, and not surprisingly, they got her also as a hostage and her companion.
It should also be pointed out that by this stage there are about 13 prison guards and several Jehovah's Witnesses who were in there on, humanitarian grounds had been taken hostage at this point as well. So that there were already over a dozen hostages.
Yeah, so in total they got 18 hostages.
Yeah.
The 13 prison guards, the judge,
Yep.
and the secretary, and 3 Jehovah's Witnesses that were just preaching around in the prison when they heard the gunshots and the mess.
Yeah.
So, like I said, this wasn't the only prison that had very bad living conditions. All prisons were like that. So shortly after, because it got to the news very easily, this mutiny, especially because they got a judge among the hostages. So among other prisons around the province of Buenos Aires started to riot as well. So it says that between 5,000 and 10,000 inmates started to protest.
All around. So, I mean, some of the prisons listed are Azul,
Bahía Blanca.
Batan,
Yeah.
Dolores,
Yeah.
and La Plata, and San Nicolas.
San Nicolas.
San Nicolas.
That's a nice city.
Yeah.
In the meantime, the families of the hostages, prisoners, journalists, and politicians were starting to gather in front of Sierra Chica. So the rioters got actually to negotiate a little bit at the beginning. They exchanged 2 prison guards that were injured for 4 other new hostages, because they were going to be nice enough, but they are not dumb. And one of the hostages that actually volunteered to get inside the prison was Jorge Crolling, which is going to be important because he was a witness and he has given many interviews about what happened in the inside and what makes this riot so famous and so macabre. Macabre. So bloody. So there was a very particular conflict inside the prison. So we had the 12 apostles. So they were a group and they were particularly violent, or they were known to be particularly violent. But there was another group. According to the 12 apostles and other inmates that joined them, there was another group that were known as arruinaguachos. So this is a word in Spanish. What it means, it's arruinar. It's to ruin or to mess around. And guacho, it's like a slang for children or boy. So basically what they said is that there was this group that they would ruin young boys. They would sexually abuse the younger or the weaker inmates. They would also even extortion them.
Extort them, yeah.
So they would give them
Threaten their families.
But, they would get to abuse the families of the youngest inmates because they would force them to have a reunion with them or whatever. They were also the snitches of the prison guards, and they were able to carry around weapons, knives or shifts. Shifts in the prison. So, they weren't very loved. No. And I wouldn't be surprised. So this is the version of the 12 apostles, but I wouldn't be surprised that such hierarchy and such violence was possible in a prison. And the leader of this group was Agapito Lencinas, who was in jail with a life sentence. Life sentence for homicide.
Mind you, when the mutiny did kick off and things started getting serious, a lot of the inmates holed up in, the inmates who wanted nothing to do with the mutiny and wanted to stay well and truly out of harm's way, all holed up in the chapel. And one of the prison's more notorious, or infamous, I should say, members, guests, was there as well. Who was that?
Well, there were actually two serial killers, like serial killers in a more proper way. Inside the prison, one of them was Carlos Robledo Puch, perhaps the most famous serial killer of Argentina. It's him and Cayetano Santos Godino, whom was the subject of our first episode. They are the two most famous. So Carlos Robledo Puch was in jail over 11 counts of murder and several counts of rape and robbery. And he was nicknamed the Angel of Death or the Black Angel. So he was a tough cookie.
Yeah.
And he's still alive and he's still in prison. But odd enough, he didn't take part in the riot. What some witnesses said is that they saw him carrying a Bible running into the chapel. And there was another serial killer as well, whom is one of the very first. Raúl González Igonet, who had been convicted in the 60s for the murder of 3 women. He was nicknamed the Madman of the Hammer because he allegedly, he claimed to be innocent, but he allegedly killed his victims with a hammer. He would break into these old ladies' houses, steal them. I think he abused some of them, and he murdered at least 3. So yeah, neither of them took part of the riot. They chose to
they were
run away to a chapel.
Yeah, they sought sanctuary in the chapel with, again, the snitches were known to not take part in any of the active riots and stayed well away from the...
Yeah, but I don't know if Robledo was a snitch. I think
no, but he just didn't want to take part. I think that's where all the non-combatants, I guess you could say.
So the 1st of April is when the real slaughter began. So remember, Agapito Lencinas was the leader of the Arinaguachos group, the group that would sexually abuse and that they were snitches of the guards. So one of his gang members was murdered at the morning of the 1st of April. He was shot and stabbed to death.
Yeah.
And in a quickly succession.
Yeah, in quick succession. Yeah, fairly quick succession.
Other 6 inmates were murdered until the very one, Agapito Lencinas, he was shot twice. According to Jorge Crolling, he was shot twice and also stabbed several times, even when he was already dead. And then he was beheaded. And then what happened?
Well, they decided to have a nice bit of recreation, finally head outside, get some sun and play soccer with
Football.
Sorry, football. Yeah. Play football with the head
of Agapito.
Yes.
It's also said that a different group, that mostly all of the people from Agapito's gang, all those who were murdered, were also beheaded. And another witness, I think Jorge Crolling, also says that he saw them playing golf with a head. So they really hated these people because for a person to desecrate a body, to murder a person, of course.
Yep.
But also the need to humiliate this person even in death. So there was another member, another inmate that nowadays he's still alive and free, and he has a YouTube channel. And he is Ariel Acuña, who was nicknamed El Gitano or the Gypsy. So he claimed only to take part of the riot because he was friends with Jorge Pedraza, but he just wanted to escape. And he says that at some point, everything started with a prison break, and they ended up having a couple of bodies. So another inmate, who was known as King Kong, who had worked in an abattoir, like the Australian might said, suggested that they might as well chop the bodies off and burn them in the bakery
oven, which got quite hot, about 700 degrees, so more than enough to, to incinerate the bodies and get rid of evidence and any lingering contamination. But they decided to go one step further and extend an olive branch, although pretty messed up, cannibalistic olive branch, to the hold up security guards.
And that's when the cannibalism started. And some people deny, actually, that this happened, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. That someone had the idea of making empanadas with the meat of the
buttock.
The rump of some of the inmates. There's another version that they made stew or they made a shepherd's pie. But Ariel Acuña is one of the inmates that witnessed to have made the empanadas with his very own hands.
Now, and the bodies, these empanadas were then served up to the guards who, by all reports, they were eaten and thought of quite delicious, and even the meat was a little sweet.
That it was sweet, exactly. So what one of the prison guards, Oscar Iztarroalde, said in the trial of the riot that happened many years afterwards, that they offered him some empanadas, that Miguel Acevedo, that prisoner, gave him 2, and he waited until he ate one of them, and he was like, "Oh, so do you like it?" And Oscar Iztarralde was like, "Yeah, it was really nice. It was sweet." And then Acevedo just laughed at his face and told him, "You have just eaten a thief. Now you're going to be a better person." Because this, not only that they were snitches, that they were rapists, but they were like petty crime thieves. So according to coming back to what I said, they say there is no honor among thieves, and there's quite some honor. The people that do petty crime, they are not.
Yeah, they're not considered to be part of the. I guess. They're not. They don't fit into the same category of hierarchy and aren't as, I guess, respected as some of the more hardened criminals committing some more serious crime.
It's not as fancy as stealing a bank, for sure.
No, definitely.
That's top notch.
Yep.
But yeah. Some other hostage claimed to have heard the prisoners said that they were eating one of the other inmates, Jose Cepeda, who was also from the gang of Agapito Lencina, and they were trying to make him chop a body off.
Yep.
And he didn't want to, he resisted, and that's why he was murdered. But I think that's something that maybe the prisoners would do to scare the hostages. Because, cannibalism is a taboo. So it's something that is acceptable only in very few societies. And when people rely on cannibalism for survival stuff, I think there is a lot of shame. So I don't really think that they will be eating human meat and be so joyous about that.
Well, and bragging about it so openly. Like you said, it's not like they were starving at that point.
No, they weren't.
The kitchens from accounts were stocked. They had plenty of flour and...
Yeah, they had some stuff.
Dry store, so...
I'm trying to think, famous cases of cannibalism, I don't know, the Donner Party.
Yeah, the Donner Party.
Or the Uruguayan rugby team that got lost in the Andes. They rely on cannibalism, but when they were just skin and bone.
Yeah, it was an extreme last resort of survival to cannibalize anyone. So definitely not something they resorted to and then were, happy about it. It caused immense trauma and, wasn't something...
How does human meat taste?
Well...
Have you wondered that?
Well, no, apparently like pork.
Because we're very fatty, to be honest.
But the flavour is, the nickname for, the euphemism for human meat is long pork. So
I shouldn't be laughing about this, but I think cannibalism is weird and fascinating somehow.
mm,
Well, some other time we're going to talk about some cannibalistic.
oh yeah,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
oh yeah, no doubt.
Well, we have the man eater herself, Catherine Knight,
That's
in
right.
Australia.
That's it. Well, at least knows how to make a good curtain.
At least she knows how to skin a long pig.
Yep, that's right. Eek.
So apparently there were 4 prison guards that had accidentally partake in this cannibalism. I wouldn't be surprised if they fed the meat to the prison guards, because they didn't hurt the prison guards, but they were
Still spiteful of them. They still wanted to,
yeah.
you know, injure them in some way, and I guess this is a non-violent way that they could.
They made them eat the snitches. So it's not only that snitches get stitches, they got cooked. So anyhow, when... I can say this afterwards. So like you said, the oven of the bakery was extremely high, but not high enough to burn the thieves.
No. The teeth. Yeah.
The teeth, sorry. The teeth of the thieves or of the snitches. So afterwards, when an inquest was done, it was found that they were at least 7 bodies were burnt in the oven. So, and those were of Agapito Lencina, the leader of this group, then Víctor Gaitan Coronel, Luis Romero Alameda, Daniel Nis Escobar, José Cepeda Pérez, the inmate that we already mentioned, Palomo Polieschuk, and Mario Barrionuevo Vega. So these were allegedly all part of the gang of Agapito. Going back to the timeline, on the 5th of April, the leaders, the 12 apostles, got into the roof of one of the prison and spoke to the press for the first time, and that's when the historical picture that I showed you was taken.
Yes. Now, it was quite amazing because of the panopticon layout of the prison that they were able to almost approach stand on the outer edge of one of the wings of the building closest to where the press were assembled, and actually be openly visible and essentially yell or communicate with people on the outside, or the press on the outside, and that the press and everyone else for that matter could easily see in. There wasn't a giant wall per se on the surrounding it. There was fencing and security grill and mesh and stuff like that. But from the vantage point of the outside looking into the prison, they were easily visible. As I said, it wasn't like there was a sort of a single couple of blocks on the inside and high walls surrounding them. It was kind of the opposite. So the prisoners and the 12 apostles were able to make their somewhat iconic appearance. And if anyone's interested, so there are some magnificent documentaries that are fairly easy to find on YouTube.
They don't have English. I mean, they have automatic English subtitles, but they are very...
but
they're a bit lousy.
even so, it's quite fascinating.
It helps you get an idea of what the process was and how the media looks in Argentina, which they're pretty fucking hilarious somehow. I mean, I don't know. So what were the 12 apostles asking for? At some point, they still wanted to escape, so they solicited for cars and guns also. But they were actually looking forward getting... because you see, how do you say when a person is it's in prison, but as a preventive measure?
I would say, preventive sentencing or...
Preventive sentencing until they get on a trial, but, that's one of the things that fucking suck about the prison in Argentina, is that sometimes people are just years and years in prison without even getting a trial. And I'm talking about a petty crime, for example. So nowadays it's more like more than 50% of the population in prison, and I think it actually works similar in New Zealand. But they are just there waiting to get a sentence.
Remanded in custody, I think.
Yeah, they are remanded in custody, but they are in prison already. So it's like they're getting their punishment, quote unquote, before being on a proper trial. So it's like you are really guilty until proven innocent, and not innocent until proven guilty.
I mean, that's often when bail comes into it, or fairly strict, remanded on bail, or remanded to home detention or something. But that's usually cases where the accused is thought to not be a risk to either flight, leaving the country, or committing more crimes. So in some cases, it's decided that the accused is too much of a risk to society to be able to remain in the community while they're being sentenced.
Yeah, maybe.
Or otherwise they'll go on the lam, and it'll take a long time, or take too much effort for the police to find them again. Or they the bail is set at too high a number, and they just can't fill the bail, or no bail bondsman will meet it.
Yeah, it's actually a thing to get more into deepness. But so what they wanted, the 12, coming back to the 12th apostle, is that they wanted to get this law that already exists in Argentina, the law of 2 multiplied.
Yeah.
2 multiply 1. So that would be that until getting a sentence, a prisoner, when you get your sentence, and they should also take in consideration all the time that they've been in jail, in preventive measures.
Yeah. So where they deduct a time already served.
Yes.
They deduct the time already served.
The time already served, exactly. That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
And to be fair, many of these people, because they were, to be fair, that was also, they were really
quite career criminals by that
stage. They have a career of criminals, but when you look at the personal stories of each one, they just started with petty crime, being adolescents. And once you get into the prison, everything just turns worse and worse for them. I mean, Ariel Acuña, the former apostle that is now a YouTuber, he's very open about telling anecdotes about the prison, but he really says that the first time that he got in a prison was because he stole some stuff, some petty crime when he was an adolescent. And when he got in prison, he had the option of joining the part of the prison where all the Jehovah's Witnesses were, like all the
proletizing,
the hermanitos, like the little brothers part, or he could choose to fight to death with another prisoner just to prove that he was strong enough. And he really didn't choose to fight.
Yeah,
it was more like
someone
had
chose
to fight.
him. Yeah,
and he's very adamant in telling that if you are fighting in prison, you fight to death. You don't fight with your fist. You're going to fight with a knife or with a shift, and it's to death. So he basically says, okay, so I got into prison for being a thief, but I became a murderer in prison. We just cannot mention the massacre that it was done in the prison without mentioning how corrupt the system is, because that's what I think it's fair.
Yeah. Anyhow.
In the meantime, there was also a pharmacy in the prison that was easily
accessible once the
mutiny started. So not only they were fueled with anger towards other inmates or the prisoners, but they got lots of legal drugs. And they were also making like a homemade beverage, alcoholic beverage, which is called pajarito. So they were really... on edge.
Yeah.
That's a way of saying it.
They were pretty loaded by that stage, I think it's fair to say.
But it was until only like 8 days after the mutiny started,
Yep.
which was a Good Sunday. This wasn't a coincidence. They wanted it to make it that way.
Yep.
I think they were using the symbolism of being in a mutiny in Holy Week. When they finally surrendered themselves, Marcelo Brandan Juarez, there are records that he asked to see his mother before he surrendered himself, but for whatever reason, she wasn't able to travel around that place. So some other inmate that was very tired of the process of the mutiny, because in the mutiny, other prisoners would start stealing to other inmates, or even it says that someone raped. So it wasn't really as organized as the 12 apostles wanted to make it look. But anyhow, one of the prisoners convinced another prison guard that apparently had some other pills or legal drugs to give all of them to Brandan Juarez and trick him into getting very extremely high. So they could just stop him, because his Brandan Juarez nickname was Popo, which means shit. I don't know why, but his other nickname was Falopa, which means drugs, because he was a bit of an addict. So that's when they finally surrendered themselves, and they were also running low on food and other sorts of...
Yeah, and it's at this stage as well that the penitentiary services started... making an armed incursion into the prison. It was fairly slow going from some of the footage I've seen, and after it was after about 6 hours that that pressure from the guards, from the assault guards, and then the tiredness and the hunger. I think they decided to call it quits.
Yeah, and they also tried to dig a tunnel outside. One of the apostles that had like a long history of trying to escape from prison was the one that had the idea, but they couldn't make it through because the base of the prison is in a granite.
Yep,
it's in a
very
mine.
very hard stone. Yep.
So yeah, they wouldn't make it.
No.
So they were taken to the Caseros maximum security prison, from which they tried to escape again 6 months afterwards, but this time the police just plainly beat the hell out of them. I think they didn't get the chance to get as many hostages, or they couldn't get to have a judge as a hostage. That's the thing with Sierra Chica. So on the 14th of April of 2000 is when the trial from the mutiny started, and it was broadcast all around Argentina. Do you remember how the 12 apostles were kept?
Yes, they had very open cages. It looked kind of like old zoos, old Victorian English zoos used to look, with the big iron bars in a central square cage, plonked in the middle of a concrete square, and then everyone around them kind of just gawking in, and that's really how the 12 apostles were tried.
Again, there were over like 100 policemen and several canines also in the facilities, because that's how scary they were. And fair enough, many of the prison guards told about the stories of cannibalism during the trial. In the meantime, Maria Mercedes Malere, the judge that was taken as a hostage, she claimed to have she took a beating. Well, not a beating, she got punched by Miguel Angel Dávalos, one of the apostles, but that's all the violence she claimed to have received. I think they were smart enough to know that they shouldn't hurt her anymore.
That would be, That
would be very bad for them.
Yep.
And so at the end, Jorge Pedraza, Juan Murgia, Marcelo Brandon Juárez, Miguel Acevedo, Víctor Esquivel, and Miguel Ángel Ruiz Dávalos were given the life sentence. Some other of the apostles were given 15 years in prisons, 12 years of prison, and some other inmates were absolved. So let's say there were 12 of them, the original group that started to fight, but the ones that joined the mutiny were many more. So nowadays, Jorge Pedraza, whom was later nicknamed as El Panadero or the Baker, because of the disposal of the bodies, he's still in jail in Ezeiza with 5 life sentences. Marcelo Brandon Juárez was released somehow, some other time after he got in jail, but he got caught again because he tried to kidnap a businessman. No, it wasn't a businessman. It was more like not a businessman, like a guy that owned like a diaper factory. Like the owner of the diaper factory. Well, Marcelo Brandon Juárez.
A business owner.
A business owner. Okay. Yes, business owner. Meantime, Miguel Chiquito Acevedo, who was the one that was serving the empanadas, he was murdered in prison for in the hand of other inmates. Juan Murgia is free nowadays, and he works as a taxi driver in La Plata. Well, Ariel Acuña is the one that is the YouTuber. And, well, I've tried to track the lives of some other of them, but I don't want to give
Speculate.
too much. Speculate, and there's, like, some other that was actually living in the streets and got murdered in the streets, but it was actually like a repent apostle. And this and that. And you know how they called Jorge Crawling, the prison guard? What was his nickname?
What was his nickname?
Canguro.
Canguro, that's right.
And you know what that means?
What does that mean specifically?
Kangaroo.
Kangaroo.
I couldn't find why they nicknamed
Kangaroo?
like that.
No?
Kangaroo.
Okay.
Canguro. Kangaroo.
Kangura. Yeah.
It's almost phonetically the same. So, Jorge Crawling, Kangaroo, he kept working as a prison guard, and he actually kept a souvenir from the mutiny.
Oh.
And what was it?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, he actually kept a shiv.
A 30 centimeter shiv.
So it's fairly big, prison-made weapon that,
That it was given to him by Marcelo Brandon Juárez. I mean, he just said that he found the shift and had a paper that said for Kangaroo. He keeps that as a war trophy. And he claimed that he never tried the meat empanadas because he was Holy Week and he's a Christian. So, or Catholic.
Yeah, Catholic. Yeah.
So
he wouldn't eat the...
he wouldn't eat the meat. Well, that's what he says.
That's what he says.
Hopefully, I really hope.
Yeah, that's something you don't want to have on your conscience.
And you don't want to have that on your tummy either.
No.
So he kept working, and he was actually like good friends, quote unquote, with Carlos Robledo Puig. Like they like to talk about the Second World War, and they like to discuss about how to end with crime or something like that.
Yeah.
So Kangaroo, he's quite a character. But some other of the prison guards were given medals.
Yep, recognized for their part in the...
for their bravery or for all the...
just keeping it together.
Yeah, all the time. But most of them agree that they never receive any type of psychiatric treatment after that. And they pretty much feel like they've been abandoned by the state, which I am not surprised. And in a different interview that was given, that Carlos Robledo Puig, let's remember the most famous serial killer of Argentina, maybe. He claimed that all the thing with the empanadas and the football match with the human
their heads,
were lies. But can you really trust him? He has like a very fascinating story. It's like an almost born to be a killer.
And yeah, I mean, a narcissist doesn't really want any of the spotlight taken off them. And to be honest, he was holed up in the chapel, so
yeah,
I don't think he was privy to
I don't think
those
he really could
activities.
see anything.
No, I don't think so. So I think, yeah, he's just trying to downplay something that would take attention away from him,
Yeah,
perhaps.
perhaps. Or he just likes to lie because that's the way he is,
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
yeah.
So that was the mutiny of Sierra Chica, the longest and bloodiest of Argentinian history. What are your thoughts on this heartwarming story?
Well, yeah, like a lot of, as you were saying, a lot of the criminals started off in pretty destitute. Well, a lot of the apostles started off in fairly downtrodden circumstances, and with a lot of criminals, they start off in petty theft, and then once they get into jail, it becomes a bit of a survival academy, and things tend to exacerbate. They're forced to join gangs for protection or mutual protection, and from there, the community develops and they become more hardened criminals on the outside because they're hard to get employed once you've got a criminal record. Yep. So, the only avenue left to pursue is crime, and it just gets harder and harder, crime-wise, and they spend longer and longer in prison once they're apprehended, and, once they're sort of accepted into that life. I don't want to say indoctrinated into that life, but it does become a criminal's life, and it sometimes people are able to reform, but often, as was the case, a lot of these guys, even after the mutiny, the ones who did get out of jail ended up going back because they felt they had no option, or just didn't want to reform, even after they'd seen quite possibly the worst of prison, and ended up committing crimes, getting tried, going back. So, the cycle never got broken. Prisons definitely didn't reform anyone in those circumstances.
Yeah.
So, it just seems like there was no circuit breaker. And, everyone gets, they say everyone gets a choice, but the pressures that are put on someone to make various choices is completely different. No choice exists in a vacuum.
Yeah.
There are pressures, everyone has pressures on them when they have a choice presented to them. In the case of a lot of criminals, they're stealing because they've got, can't afford rent, can't afford food, what have you. So, petty theft for, an adolescent, unfortunately, is really the only option, especially if there's no work, and especially if you had no support to go to school, get an education, join the
get mental
ladders.
Treatment.
Well, yeah, and exactly get mental and medical treatment.
Yeah. It looks like the violence escalated very quickly in the mutiny of Sierra Chica, but in reality, it was just like a downward spiral of corruption and overpopulation in the prison, and connection between some prison guards that they would turn the blind eye on some other prisoners, abusing others or stealing others. And it was maybe waiting to happen. It turned out to be quite spectacular at some point.
Yep.
Yeah.
But just to I guess the 12 apostles and their particular their gang was kind of opposed to the guards in that they weren't the snitches. So the snitches obviously always get special protection. They're allowed to carry their knives and shivs on them, and presumably got some other special treatment and considerations from the guards, whereas the 12 apostles were not extended those considerations, and obviously felt spite towards the guards, hence why they fed them their snitches.
The meat, their snitches, exactly. And it wouldn't kill the prison guards also because they were going to go back to jail after this, but I cannot imagine what sort of treatment an inmate that had murdered a prison guard or a police might get from the other prison guards. I also think that that's why they didn't kill any of the policemen, because they would get a huge retaliation.
Absolutely. That as well as having being charged with killing a police officer or a guard would send them to jail for life, or very, very, very severe sentence. So if they were disciplined enough to rein in their action and contain it to just other prisoners, then they'd feel the brunt of the law slightly less than if it was a police or a security guard.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe that's why they choose to make food with the meat of the prisoners and give it to the guards, perhaps, like try to get a way of humiliate them without physically hurting them. And while the other bodies, Jorge Crowley, this prison guard, describes a very macabre scene in which after being murdered, after they murder Agapito Lencinas, the leader of the gang that would rape the other inmates, that they kind of crucified him, and they also took their guts out, took his eyes out and stick it in each nipple. And he also saw how some of the prisoners that were murdered, that they got their tongues cut out and then stick it in the walls with pins.
Right. So kind of
desecrating the bodies in any way possible.
Yeah. And probably I guess a humiliating message to snitches as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. That ends the saga of the 12 apostles.
That was a long trip. Very bloody trip.
Very bloody, very macabre.
Disembowel. Where can our fans find us?
Well, basically, if you Google a history of evil men, you will find us on Spotify, on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on
Facebook, Instagram.
Yep.
And we have a Patreon page.
Yes, if you'd like to drop a few dollars in. And otherwise, we will be back soon with a next installment. And we'll leave you with the soothing tones of Steph Animal. Take care.
Take care.